So if someone would have said that the TCU quarterback was going to be the MVP of this year's Alamo Bowl about Wednesday, I think most people would have agreed. Now, if they would have said that was Bram Kohlhausen, TCU's backup quarterback, they might have given pause, but that's exactly what happened here in the Alamo Dome against TCU down Oregon after a 31-point comeback over with a guy in Bram Kohlhausen that we just got to know today in his first start and his last career start.
Yeah, we did just get to know him today, and I was struck by his personality, how level-headed he was and how, he still almost looked like he was angry after the game. But it was the biggest moment of his career. It was the highlight of his career, and he came through in the second half when, TCU looked like it was on the way to one of the worst games it's ever played under Gary Patterson and maybe before. Because I know the news of the week with Trevon Boykin shook them up. It's a hard thing to get over, and something needed to happen. It turns out it was Bram Kohlhausen, who is one of Trevon Boykin's best friends. He talked about him in the post-game interview in stark terms. He made it very clear what he believed about Trevon Boykin and how it affected him and what it meant for him in this game. And, somebody put it on Twitter very well. They said, sports is cool sometimes. And for Bram Kohlhausen, that was the case tonight.
Right. He came back while in season. His father passes away, deals with that the day of the Oklahoma State loss, gets to play some after that. Very chippy play. He's out here throwing blocks on touchdown runs. He's trying to do his best interpretation of a Boykin flip. Twice went out with injury. He said at one point fell on his neck, kind of re-injured an injury from high school, felt chills down his spine and down his arms. Just a real gutsy performance from Kohlhausen. And so it seems like the way that this kind of turns out is very indicative if you look back on TCU's season as a whole.
Boy, it sure is. This season is almost indescribable with the amount of injuries these guys had. They even had one player leave the team, a starter. You never see that. So these guys remade their team on the fly in the Big 12. It's a tough conference to play in, and they still came out of it, tied for second. They got third on the tiebreaker, and they got to play in this bowl, which is a good bowl. They had a good opponent, and they got a chance to make something out of that season. They got 11 wins out of it, but for the twists and turns, the ups and downs that this season took for them, this last game sort of made you think of all those with the way it started and then the way it came back. They came back because it also matched so many of the comebacks they've made this year. When you think about the Kansas State game and the Texas Tech game and how close they were to getting out of that Oklahoma game with another victory.
Right. And so you had a few moments to decompress, to not only look at this game and this season. Final thoughts on the Alamo Bowl, TCU season, and as they head into the off season.
Well, I'm glad the Big 12 is tied to the Alamo Bowl for another 10 years because it'd be nice to come back at this point sometime. But really, I've got to sit back and do the same thing and just think about this season for a while. I've got to write some recaps about it. I've got to write a story about Bram Kohlhausen. I got to talk to him on the loading ramp for a good long while after the game, and he told me more about, his story, his season, and what he's felt, during the course of the year and tonight. So I want to write that and do a good job with it. But hey, there's a lot of work to do on this season. A lot of stuff to still put in the can and just put a lid on it. But it was an amazing ride. We saw some amazing performances, some amazing games. College football, you really just don't know what you're going to get every week, and most of the time it's something you've never seen before.
A lot of talk about the job that Gary Patterson did this year with what he was given, what he had. You look at seasons like the Rose Bowl season, the Fiesta Bowl season, even last year bringing in the two offensive coordinators to change things up. But I think you definitely have to say this ranks in those top handful of performances that Gary Patterson has done in his career at TCU, turning what seemed to be a complete nightmare of a season into a very, very successful season, and nothing more indicative of that than the performance here in the Alamo Bowl tonight.
Yeah, and he won't say it, but I think he's very proud of of the job he did. He's not going to come out and say that, but I think this team also, found a place in his heart because, coaches tell their teams to be resilient and come back and play every snap. They don't always do that. They don't all do that. But I think this team just kind of tickled him with the way it actually did that this year. Maybe on its own, maybe it was an organic part of their nature. Next year's team is going to be different. This year's was different than last year's. You just don't know what you're going to get. But for an 11-2 season, I think this is one he's going to remember for a long time.
Most seasons end with what we call in this industry an obituary. This one ends on a high note with a celebration. So for Carlos Mendez, I'm Travis Brown, and we'll see you next season.